who were in their first term.
Okay.
We've got Nick.
How do I know we're in the meeting, or we're already?
Already set everything up, so when we start, you could just hit recording.
I started recording already.
Yeah, oh, okay, then we can let the people in. I will.
And then how do we let people in? Okay.
Yeah, there's a waiting room.
Mary Elizabeth, okay, and that's Lee Chung. Oh, Nick Fazio.
All right.
I'll get ready
Hi,
to start.
everyone.
Good evening, oh, they're still.
Can they hear us? Oh, no.
Good evening, everyone. I'll wait for Geraldine, because it looks like.
Yeah, she's not connected just yet.
So these are the microphones over here, right?
Yeah.
We're just waiting for one connection, so if you can hear us, can you give a thumbs up perhaps, or say,
Just to turn the cameras on too.
or you can turn the camera on so we can see.
They can use the reactions to raise hand.
Yeah, I'm gonna, yeah. Can everyone hear?
I can hear you.
Okay, hi, Nick.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for the hands up, Mary.
My coworker, Mary Elizabeth.
Okay, great.
And Geraldine, can you hear us?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So, first of all, thank you all for coming. I'm just going to start off with the, like the spiel that I give at the beginning of every, housing meeting.
6:02, we're starting the meeting.
Thank you, and all right, that is 6:02. So, good evening. I'm Rashida Hilliard, Chair of the Housing Committee. As a community board committee, we loosely follow Robert's Rules of Order. We will be following the agenda that was previously distributed. If we open a topic to general discussion, we ask that if you would like to speak, that you raise your hand and I will call on you. Our goal is to have a good, robust discussion of our agenda items. However, if we have many people who would like to speak on an individual topic, you may only get to speak once, so please make it count. If you are not speaking, we ask that you keep yourself muted to prevent background noise from interrupting others. If you're on Zoom, which many of us are, to raise your hand, you will select the reactions at the bottom of the screen. And so far, it seems that everyone has already been doing that. If you're on the phone, you press *6 to mute and unmute, and *9 to raise your hand. And now, without further ado, we'll go into roll call. So, Sebastian Chidilopoulos, Lee Chung,
Present.
Ingrid DeLeon. Right now, say absent. Rashida Hilliard, present. Jessica Sosa. Here. Thank you. So 4 out of 5 of us are here right now. So we have a quorum if we're voting for anything. But we have a quorum, so thank you. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from Monday, November 25th. May I have a motion to? We have one. Thank you. So our minutes have been approved for Monday, November 25th. So our main topic of discussion now is that we're going to have a presentation from ARC. So I'll just read a little bit here before we turn it over to our representatives. So ARC is the Association of Riverdale Cooperatives and Condominiums. ARC has been serving the co-op community in Riverdale and throughout New York City for more than 40 years. The Association of Riverdale Cooperatives and Condominiums, or ARC as I'll call it, is a domestic nonprofit corporation certified under Section 402 of the Not-for-Profit Corporation Law. It was formed for the mutual advancement of the interests of its members engaged in the ownership and operation of buildings owned cooperatively or in condominiums. So I would first like to warmly thank our representatives for joining us. We have Michael Heller, or Mike Heller? Mike Heller.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't care what you call me, as long as you don't call me late for lunch. Old.
Love that.
So thank you. We have Mike Heller, and we have Ed Yeager.
Correct.
And they will both be speaking about FISP, which stands for the Facade Inspection Safety Program.
Oh, thank you.
And it's
Formerly Local Law 11.
Thank you. And it's a set of regulations in New York City that require periodic inspection of buildings and exterior walls. And so, we're going to turn it over to them, and after the presentation, we'll open it up to questions and answers. So, without further ado, whoever wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Heller. I was formerly district manager of the community board, but I'm looking at the list of people on the committee, and there's been a lot of turnover since I was DM. So it's very interesting to see a lot of new faces. I know, it's a burden. It's a lot of work to be on the community board as a volunteer. People don't realize the effort that community board members put into it. And as a resident of the neighborhood, I'm grateful for all of your work. Can I ask, I don't care if you're eating dinner, if you can, those of you who don't mind turning your cameras on, that'd be great if we could see who's on. Just a little aside, my wife, my wife is a college professor at CUNY, and during the pandemic and even now, she teaches some remote classes. And the students are not required to turn their cameras on, although SUNY requires. It's interesting, SUNY you have to, CUNY you don't. So she'll look at her screen, and there's just all these little black boxes looking back at her. And I say,
Mike,
how do
I
you
just
tolerate
assumed
this?
you saw me enough
I-
every day so that I didn't have to turn my camera on, but
I understand, you can just sit back, you can eat, but it's really, it's interesting. I like to look at the people I'm dealing with. But I'm a member of a number of organizations in Riverdale and the West Bronx, and I've been involved in community affairs for many years. Been involved in ARC for maybe 15 years. I've been president for, I think, 2 to 3 years at this point. That may change shortly. Actually, it is going to change. I'm leaving ARC in a couple of weeks. I've decided to take a little burden off myself, and there'll be a leadership change. So you're going to be getting some new leadership in. I'm not really at a liberty to say who that is at this point. But we're very much involved in issues such as Local Law 11. Hello, David, how are you? Good. How you doing? And the FISP. Just a little, when I was a student at Columbia University many years ago, that's what really started off, I think it was late, maybe 1980. There was a young woman from Barnard who was walking down Broadway at 113th Street, and there was a bar right on Broadway, and the parapet collapsed and killed her. There was a huge outcry of anger and pain at this. And this what is really, obviously in New York City, had stuff collapsed for many years. I'm a student of ancient history. Cicero in ancient Rome, they were called the insulas. Rome was full of apartment buildings. They were very poorly made, and they would just collapse utterly. And the owners didn't mind that much because they could just cut them out and build new ones and bring new people in at a higher cost. So buildings collapsing is really nothing new where there's urbanized societies. But this really started the whole situation that we have now with sidewalk bridges everywhere. And as all of you know, every time there is something horrible that happens, the screws get turned a little bit tighter. The regulations get made stiffer. That garage collapse last year has the city's now putting in new requirements for garage inspection, so the burdens on buildings get a little bit tougher every time something horrible happens. Obviously, no one wants anyone to be hit by falling bricks or collapsed garages, but there has to be some sort of balance struck between what's reasonable, what's doable, and that which simply cannot be afforded, certainly by co-ops where the residents pay the cost, and even rental buildings where the owners have the same problems. No one likes to use the word landlords, it's sort of an obsolete term, but the building owners get faced with those costs as well. So Ed here, who's been on his board for many years at the Amalgamated Houses, has extremely good first-hand knowledge of costs involved with implementing these programs. So I'm not a member of my board right now, so I don't know the day-to-day expenses. I talk to the members of my board frequently, and I know that we, had to have an assessment to pay for the most recent inspection, because we had even though it was done just a few years ago, I live in a rather tall building that faces west, and the westerlies just blast the hell out of the grouting on the building, and it's just the nature of the construction that tall buildings get assaulted by winds, and you're always going to find little cracks developing. So Ed has some stories to tell, and he's very vocal about this. So I'd like to just turn it over to him at this point. Ed, you're on.
Okay. As Mike says, I am very vocal about this, so ARC knows my positions and hasn't told me not to, so
No.
I will speak educate and opinionate. As Mike says, our, local law 11 started after it started as local law 10, but then was changed to 11, and when it was updated, after a student got hit by something that fell from a building.
Almost 50
When-
years ago now.
When it started, the architect or engineer inspecting the building could stand on the street, take a pair of binoculars, look at the building, and decide if the building was safe or if it had problems. Over the years, DOB has, whether it's DOB alone or DOB and the city council, have tightened their regulations. First, they went to, well, you had to have one scaffold drop on the building where the architect engineer got close to the building personal. Then it changed to a scaffold drop every 60 feet. Now they've added a probe on what are called cavity wall buildings. A building, say, from the 1950s would not be a cavity wall building. A building from the 1970s probably is. What a cavity wall building is you have two walls. The brick side that you face is called the rain curtain. That's connected to the inner wall by metal ties. Those metal ties, in some cases, they're afraid either have corroded or never really put in the quantity that they should have been put in. So now they require, I think it's every 60 feet, a probe to remove brick and see the condition of the metal ties. The inspections alone have gotten expensive. So a building can be perfectly safe, and it will impact your budget just to inspect it every 5 years. My co-op is saving money on the scaffold drop by having someone who rappels. That is, it's like a mountain climber. They attach something at the roof of the building, and they let themselves down on a rope. That's cheaper to do than hanging a scaffold, but it's still expensive. And they have to do that, as I said, every 60 feet. We had a cost before we got to rappelling. I don't know what it'll cost us this time. It would have cost us $2 million to do scaffold drops just to inspect, not to fix up. We have 11 buildings, 3 of which probably aren't FISP. They're lower than the 6 stories, but just to inspect is a substantial amount. Now, the other problem that we have is that DOB, not their money, so they're going beyond life safety issues in rejecting safe filings. We have one of our buildings which has courtyards, faces 3 different streets. Our architect was ready to filed it as safe. DOB's inspector came out and said, nah, I don't like this, I don't like that. I'm not accepting the safe filing. It has cost us more than $60,000 a year to keep up the bridging. Now,
The scaffold bridging?
the scaffold bridging, the protection. Now, the politicians are getting upset with all the bridging in the city, and they said, get it down, it's been up too long. We got a call from someone high up in DOB who says, get the bridging down. Well, I'm looking at the report, it's not really unsafe. So maybe you ought to screen off the small portion that's unsafe and get it off down everywhere. Well, we should have been able to do that 5 years ago. If 3 facades are safe and one isn't, take down the facades that are safe, address the one that isn't. We spent $2 million on that building. And they're still telling us, nah, it didn't meet their standards, because it doesn't cost them money, it costs us. So that's one of the problems with this, and it's not us alone. I have spoken to board members throughout the city, I have spoken to architects throughout the city. They are having safe filings rejected by DOB. And then you have the city council turning around and saying, get the bridging down. The city council, and I'm not talking about our council member, most of the things that I'm upset about happened before his watch. And I don't know his position on any of these issues. But I understand there's a bill in the city council saying you have to renew permits every 90 days. Well, you can't even get contractors to bid. You know, if you find you have a safety issue on your building, you have your architect prepare plans and specifications, then you see contractors to bid on those plans and specifications, then you send it to your lawyers. You can't even start work for 90 days. Then you can't even get the buildings department, you have to get permits from them. That adds to the time. When your building is ready to be filed, it takes them 90 days to get out there to inspect. Your architect says, my building's safe, I want to take down the bridging. Yeah, we'll get there when we get there. But the city council says, get the bridging down. You're getting beat up for both. Really, to me, the biggest problem is DOB's standards on what is safe or what they will accept a safe report on. Because they're not even claiming it's unsafe. They're claiming they don't like this, fix it. We're not going to accept the report. We're supposed to be affordable housing. They're making us unaffordable. You know, and I have an article in our community news. New York City makes housing less affordable because this isn't the only thing they're doing to us. Then, this applies to buildings 6 stories or higher. No standards at all for a 4-story building or a 3-story or anything else. So you pass another law saying you got to inspect your parapets every year, not every 5 years. So you take buildings that are subject to FISP. An architect has looked at it. He said it's safe. DOB has accepted it as safe for a 5-year cycle before the next cycle, and then the city council decides, well, we want you to look at it every year. You know, the best example I heard, someone said, we still have traffic deaths in this city. You can eliminate traffic deaths by having a 5-mile-an-hour speed limit, right? You can, safety, we all want to be safe, but you can take it too far. And when the people who are making the regulations on safety aren't the people paying the bills for safety, you get this going overboard and increasing the burden to the people who live. We're not owned by a rich corporation that's making lots of money and can afford it. We're owned by the people who live in our building, who live in affordable housing and have to meet income standards to get into our affordable housing, and you're putting the burden on them. The parapet law, the inspection doesn't have to be by an architect or engineer. It can be the super, it can be a handyman, but then you bump into problems of the people want to sign their name to it, because I assume there's a liability to signing your name. In our case, we have the architects on site now because we're doing a physical needs assessment, and they're there anyway, so we had our parapets looked at by them this year. Whether we're going to do that every year, I don't know. But it's a cost. And it's an unnecessary cost for buildings that are in FISP. Buildings that are in FISP, 4-story building, You wanna say, you better look at your parapets, go ahead. Do something for buildings that have absolutely zero safety standards that I know of for a 4-story building, where a 6-story building has to jump through these hoops. Bricks can't fall out of the 4th floor if a wall is loose. It's, you know, it's frustrating. And it's expensive, and I'm the guy, and, well, Mike's not on his board now, but we're the ones who have to go to our shareholders and say, we need an increase in carriage charges to meet these expenses. The people who are doing this to us, the people from DOB, the people from the city council, they're not standing in front of our shareholders saying, I'm the reason you have to increase your carriage charges. Oh.
It's just, so, I mean, that's a very good presentation. So, I mean, the issue is every time something happens, there's an automatic reaction on the part of the elected officials to do something. For example, a building that had the collapse on Tremont Avenue last year, which was because a complete screw-up on the part of the engineer. You know, everyone says, oh my God, how is everyone else going to be inspected now based on that terrible error on the part of an individual? So they're guaranteed to be additional regulations coming down the line to deal with that. But on the other side of the coin is the inspection cycle is every 5 years. So let's say there was a feeling, gee, maybe we can go to a 7-year inspection cycle. Would that be reasonable? So, but what happens if somebody's hit with a brick on year 6 after you do that? It would be all hell to pay for that. Whose idea was it to loosen up the regulations? So it's just a very tough political situation to figure out what's reasonable, what's affordable, and what's doable. So as we sit here, you know, we don't have any answers. We work with our elected officials. We're heavily engaged on Local Law 97 to figure out some ways to make that. I mean, Ed believes in the long run it will save money, but the short-term cost of Local Law 97 can be, you know, quite steep if you have a building that has hydronic steam heating. How do you convert that to electric? You know, can you install a heater, air conditioner in a heat pump in every room? How would you do something like that? What would the cost be? So, you know, the goals are excellent. No one really disagrees with the goals, but it's the cost of implementation. And there has to be some sort of balance struck on that. And we know our councilman, Eric Dinowitz, we have a very good relationship with him, and we deal closely with him. And in terms of Local Law 97, the state legislature had some bills last year to ameliorate the costs. They failed because anything that ameliorates the cost, the budget shortfalls fall on the city, not the state. So the city really objects to the state imposing regulations that loosen Local Law 97. I think there's one that would change the calculation for buildings that have large properties, how the numerators changed in terms of calculation.
Well, the denominator changes.
That only affects buildings that have big green properties around them, not buildings that don't.
Our departments out of Queens would do great on that.
Right, and the Queens has a very strong association, and Glen, the Northeast Queens. So, this is where we are, and we don't have any major solutions.
Well,
Right.
my solution is DOB has to change on how they enforce this. And the city council has to monitor DOB and look at it. And the parapet law, they should change that to exempt buildings that are subject to FISP.
Right, since we do it anyway.
We're doing the parapets, we're doing it in a way that is accepted by both an architect, engineer, and DOB as safe for 5 years. I have never heard of a building that has been filed as safe and accepted as safe having a problem, something fall off it within 5 years.
Okay.
So it's unnecessary. You can always find, yeah, but I can be even safer.
Of
As
course.
I said, you could go to, let's have a 5-mile speed limit. And that's what they're doing, but they're doing it on our back.
So, why don't we take some questions?
Yes, so
Excuse me, thank you. We're gonna open it up now. First of all, thank you both, for the presentation. It was a lot of, useful information, and I know our, audience agrees. So we're gonna start with questions on the audience. I see Nick's hand is raised. So Nick, you currently have the floor.
Hi,
How are you?
Go ahead, you got it.
I'm good. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for that presentation. Mike and Ed is very good information, very interesting. I have two questions. Would you like me to separate them, or should I give them to you both now and then?
If there are two questions, present your questions.
Okay, so the first question is, in terms of lack of transparency and oversight with the inspection process and the repair cost estimates, are property owners essentially left at the mercy of the inspectors and the contractors, or are there regulations regarding transparency of those inspections and those recommendations for repairs? That's the first question. My second question is, in terms of accountability for delays, in your experience, have there been co-ops that have been hit with fines because of bureaucratic hurdles and essentially no fault of their own, but ended up with fines because of these delays incurred? So those are my two questions.
Those are good
Well,
questions.
the first part of your question is the costs associated with any of the work. Buildings have a bidding process. They bring in contractors, they bring in engineers, and, you know, usually, like anything else, you want at least 3 solid bids. Those costs that have to be done fall upon the building in terms of how well they're able to negotiate contractors to come in to do the actual work, to do the inspection, do the work. So I'm not quite sure what you mean by transparency there, but the costs are what they are. If you're ordered that you have to do a certain level of work, you try to get the best possible price. You work with vendors that you're familiar with, and hopefully, you know, you're treated properly by them. But, you know, there's always unforeseen field conditions, as you know, from our building in particular. Things come up, and so I don't know about the transparency question.
Well, what I mean in terms of transparency, sorry to interrupt, but just to clarify, what I mean in terms of transparency is that, you know, if there are certain qualified inspectors, those inspectors apparently are licensed by the city or DOB. So my assumption would be, or it would be appropriate for there to be some oversight, because otherwise one of these qualified inspectors could come in and tell a building that they have to do A, B, C, and D, when half of that might not be necessary. So I'm just wondering if this type of abuse is rampant, or if there's some oversight. Is there a business integrity commission a building could report to if they feel like they're being price gouged, et cetera?
Well, that's part of the problem. You have to have your building inspected by a qualified exterior wall inspector. That's the architect or engineer that you hire to do the job. That's the person who then signs off on the work. You've done your job, you spent your $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever it is, and they say, okay, we've looked at the work, we've accepted it. But that doesn't allow you to take down your bridging. That then gets filed with DOB, and DOB sends out an inspector, and that's who looks at the work and, in a real world, would be catching the bad actors who are signing off just to give a building credit. But in practicality, they're putting their standards, which are stricter than safety standards, on it.
Mm-hmm.
The city makes money. That's something we didn't point out. When you file for work, you need a permit. When you file to put bridging up, you need a permit. That permit only lasts a limited period of time. So I think in our case, where we have bridging up for 5 years, every 3 months, we have to pay the city for permits again. The city is making money on this. Maybe that's the reason DOB wants to find buildings unsafe. They make money. They make money on violations. They make money on permits. You want to start work? You can't start work unless you have a permit from DOB to start work. More money going into the city. So instead of the city acting on behalf of its citizens, it's acting as an entity that has money at stake because it gets paid. The longer your bridging goes up, the more work you have to do, you need another permit. They get paid. So our architect engineer has a license at stake. If he files a building as safe, and it's actually unsafe, he loses his career.
And that's about to happen. That's
That,
exactly what's happening with that building.
you know, and I've spoken to architects, there are one or two bad actors out there that will file reports. But I'm hearing from competent people who've been doing this for years, and they're saying the standards have gotten too tough, and it's costing the buildings, the people, and I say the buildings, it's costing the people of New York City too much money for DOB's unsafe filing saying, we're not accepting this report.
I agree, and I have a question, oh, go ahead.
But just one thing, but on the other hand, there is political pressure now to remove many of the sidewalk bridges.
Exactly, so.
That's really.
We're getting hit on both ends.
People, their buildings, these bridges been up 10 years, so I think it's starting to swing you to get them down. You're gonna get pressure to get them down. Right.
Which goes into the violation, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, now I'm gonna get, so now, because, and one of my questions, if you don't mind, Chair.
No, of course.
Right, like, how, you've done these inspections every 5 years for how
Yeah.
many years now?
Since the mid-1980s.
So the 1980s, and like, what would you say, like, the average time of, like, the scaffold goes up, they do the inspection, and they get out? Like, how fast is that timeline?
Years. Because we have the work that has to get done.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, if the building were clean, if you just had one small thing to patch, then it would be 6 months.
Right,
But it's still
But-
6 months.
But at least, yeah.
So you're trapped, you're
Yeah.
essentially trapped.
Well, and then we've had buildings where we filed as safe and then waited 3 months where we're paying by the month for the bridging.
Right, and they've not started work, they.
Now, forget started work. We filed the building as safe after the work's been done. DOB hasn't sent an inspector out. They're very quick.
Yeah.
They're very
not
quick to be there. If an architect files a building is unsafe, they're there the same afternoon to give you a violation.
Right,
Not
but not to
bridging
give you
up.
the
But
leeway.
once your bridging is up and you've done the work, we'll get there when we get there.
So actually, my question, thank you. I'm actually writing stuff down just like, because it's a lot of good information. I think you mentioned, one of you mentioned previously that, the city council needs to oversee the DOB. Is that correct?
Well, I would like to see it, but I understand DOB is a mayoral agency, so they don't have,
Right, the city
Jurisdiction.
council.
it's not like the Congress has oversight powers. City council doesn't.
Well, they hold hearings, they do. They hold hearings, they bring the commissioners in and their representatives. So, they passed right, the buildings department is a mayoral agency, ultimately responsible to the mayor, but the city council cannot order the agency to loosen the way it inspects or anything like that. It's an administrative process. So, if the city council has a hearing and people are testifying that the buildings department is being overly picky, they can act on that, but then again, the countervailing force is, what happens if somehow they loosen the regulation and there's a disaster? So the pressure is always to be
Ends up political.
overly cautious. The other way is like, holy cow, am I gonna get in trouble if shit hits the fan? So it's that kind of situation.
I guess I get that, and I guess, because I know the reason why, we're having this meeting, one of the reasons is that, a coworker brought up that, her building, was assessed and they were, I guess, I don't know, I won't say a fine, I don't wanna, like, misword things, but they were charged. And so now the tenants, have to pay, well, the shareholders have to pay, and they were given a timeline, and I'm just wondering, if this is, I know we are worried about safety, but then there's also money that sometimes people don't have. Can there be a cap on how much, people are charged, and then the city has to cover the rest? Like, how would that?
The process, right now, the process is tracked. So, right, like, every 5 years, you gotta put a green ugly scaffold on your building, right? And you gotta wait for somebody to inspect every, 60 feet? Every 60 feet, right? And I don't know if that's every 60 feet above 5 floors or 6 floors.
No.
So that
All the
doesn't
way
make
down the
any
building.
sense, right? Because
It's all the way down the building.
because the impression is that the danger comes from it being 6 stories and plus, right? So now we're spending money on inspecting 6 stories below, where no other building that's 6 stories or 5 stories or whatever has to pay. But because you live in a tall building, now you have to waste money on doing that. Then you have to go through the bidding process and get contractors and whatever, right? While you're also trying to get a permit, because you're within the 5 years, you better have that green scaffold up, otherwise we're gonna send you a violation, right? Even though you haven't started the work, or whether or not you can schedule the work. So now you're paying for a scaffold to protect just in case, but no work is actually happening. And then you're waiting for the contracts to get bid, then you gotta wait for the contractor to get a permit, then you gotta, once they get the permit, then you gotta wait for them to have the workforce available to do the work, and hopefully finish the work, finish the work, right? Like that they don't find a problem, because once they find a problem, then it just escalates, right? Now it's like, oh, well, if there's a problem here, there's more problems everywhere. And now you're stuck with a green scaffold everywhere in the city. And then, on the contrary, then you have the city council yelling at you about, like, why you have the green scaffold? You guys are part of the issue, you created this. This process doesn't make sense. It hurts people, it hurts our community members, and it's very expensive, and it's not even necessary, right? At this point, it looks like we do need, like, a proper engineering judgment, perhaps. We'll get an EJ on it, where he's like, are we working backwards? Are there better products in the world, right, that we can start using, right? Like, is there a better way to get with this? I didn't know that they did the rappelling. I would like to look at that even for my building, because it is expensive, and it's so frustrating where, you shareholders, right, you invest in a property, you want it to look nice, and then all of a sudden, every 5 years, you get stuck with putting up ugly scaffolding that you can't get rid of because you're fighting yourself to get it done. So I feel like we need to get all these people in a room and figure out what we can do first, right?
Well, we have a good relationship. The chair of the Housing Committee is Pierina Sanchez, who's a very bright young member of the City Council, and we've had a number of meetings with her. And we don't always get the response that we're looking for, because she, has various constituencies. The City Council is very, shall we say, progressive over the past few years, and they have kind of a very sharp eye to what they see are private businesses trying to get out from under, paying what they should pay. This is a situation, the City Council has passed, a variety of bills, and some things are pending right now that would change the way co-op boards operate, in that they would have to potentially supply reasons to interviewed shareholders who get rejected. And this is, some jurisdictions are already doing this. We view it as toxic, as the Council of Co-ops and Condominiums, which is a citywide coalition that Ed's very, very active on. So, kind of the prevailing political layout of the City Council does make it hard for co-ops and condos to function the way that we think we need to do it. We do have allies, and, Eric is always an ally and working on our behalf. So it's hard to get traction on the types of issues we need. Also, many of you are probably aware that, you can no longer look at prospective residents' criminal records unless they've done some really heinous things within a fixed period of time. So this is state legislation. The state preempted the city by passing citywide rules on, you know, that you can't open up somebody's criminal record any longer unless they've, you know, been involved in sex crimes or murder.
Can you tie that to the subject? I'm so sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I'm going on about, no, what I'm doing is mentioning other things that we in ARC are always trying to get a handle on and work with our elected officials beyond this particular topic.
Oh, I understand, okay.
So that's what I'm saying. And by the way, if anybody here, you know, if you live in co-ops that are not members of ARC, we urge you to join. Our membership is $300 a year. It's pretty reasonable. We hold seminars on a wide range of issues, operating costs, energy savings. We have a legal seminar every year. So if your buildings are not members of ARC, please be in contact with us. We'd love to have you as members and put you on our list. So I made my pitch.
Okay.
We have two hands, so we start with,
Yeah, you, David.
David, and then.
Now you're next.
As Lee knows, I actually served on their ARC board with Mike and Ed, several years ago. And Mike, actually, you enlightened me. My recollection was it was a boy walking on Riverside Drive that got honked by a gargoyle. And it was a Columbia University, building that happened.
This is a Barnard student.
Right.
It was a
Girl.
student.
It was a Barnard.
Whatever.
Okay. But only girls in those days, but at any rate, this is something that, is obviously very important. It's, if you think about it, every 5 years, you've got to do a study. And they typically are a minimum of $50,000 with everything, just to study. And if the average building is 100 apartments, which is probably close to true, that's $500 per tenant or $500 per shareholder. So that's a big expenditure right then and there. But typically, a local law 11 project is 6 or 7 figures, and sometimes 8 figures. Well, that's a lot of money. And again, I think we're in agreement that safety is paramount, but 5 years might be too tight, 10 might be more appropriate. But an interesting issue we've got here in Riverdale is, unlike most of the new construction in Manhattan, which is glass and steel, most of the taller buildings here are 30 to 60 years old, and they're stone, brick or whatever, with mortar that pops. It doesn't, you know, glass windows really don't pop, but, you know, from the steel buildings, but the mortar does. And so our buildings are an age where this happens a lot. And at our last board meeting, Councilmember Sanchez gave her report, and she's talking about 2 processes, one of which was J51, that they're trying to get J51 renewed. And one of the things I mentioned to her was being able to roll in these local law 11 expenses into a new series of J51.
And J51 is only applied to lower assessed valuation apartments.
45,000 per unit or below.
But she was in agreement in the principle. We weren't negotiating details over a
Right, but
Zoom
it makes it
conference.
unusable to most.
Mike, it was the principle of being able to get tax abatement for these 5, 6, 7-figure projects through the city code. The city's right that we do need to protect our pedestrians walking, but to some degree, the city's got to take on the responsibility, and she was saying that she agreed and she did want to try to incorporate it.
So let me address a couple of things. 654, which is the equivalent of J51, passed. It applies to buildings, micheladas, affordable housing, any building where the assessed valuation, not the market value, the assessed valuation is $45,000 or less. You can check with your accountants what your building's assessed valuation is. I've heard from people in Manhattan, they're all, you know, most buildings in Manhattan aren't qualified. I know people in Queens who are qualified. So I don't know Riverdale assessed valuations. I'm in affordable housing, I'm in a state supervised program where we have our own problem with that. What you're saying, what you were talking about with people being assessed 15,000, what that is the building does the architect study, and I think David is a little out of date with 50,000, I think it's higher now. Just to do the study. Then they find out we need $1 million worth of work on this building.
Which is not typical.
Where are we getting the work, the money? That's when they go to their shareholders and say, we need X amount of money from you. So it's not the city that's finding them, it's the building saying, how are we gonna pay to fix our building? The building I described, where we've had bridging up, is a 6-story building. It's got a big surface area. So we did, as I said, more than $2 million of work on it, and the architect said, you're good now, and the city said, you're not. We have another problem. We're broke, and we can't raise money with an assessment because we're supervised by the state of New York, who says,
You have a totally different situation.
yeah, who says you can't even raise your rent without coming to us. So we're squeezed by the city saying, you need this much money to fix your building, and the state saying, we're not
Yeah.
giving enough money to do that.
Not okay.
By the way, you reminded me that, not only does the Department of Buildings have incentive to say, no, this is not good enough, you need to do more, the architect, to protect his license, has the incentive, and unfortunately, and this is something I think ARC should bring up at their meetings, is buildings should be reminded, person who does the architectural study should not, but often is, the general contractor for the construction work, and they typically get a 10 or 15% override on the work. But it often happens, you know that.
It does.
And ARC should be reminding member buildings not to ever do that.
Yeah.
Actually, can we open it up
Yeah,
to
go
Mary
for it.
Elizabeth?
And
Because
then
I know,
Sebastian, I think, had the next question too.
yeah.
So Mary, it's your
Elizabeth?
turn.
Mary Elizabeth.
After the-
Mary Elizabeth,
hold on.
Hi, Mary
Hi.
Elizabeth.
Hi, how are you? Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for, I guess, hosting this meeting. It's really, interesting, finding out a lot of information. Our building was just hit with an assessment, almost $1 million. And so, and we were just literally notified on October 5th that we need to come out, like, at least for my apartment, based on the shares, like about $15,000. Well, I have 2 college kids, and I'm a teacher. So I don't know how am I supposed to come out with $15,000. So my question is, can the city council, right? Because I guess I'm not the only one who is in this situation. Can the city council, the city, somebody, I know they have a lot of money for a lot of other things, and how can they support, obviously, people like myself, right? To really be able to afford to pay this, very expensive assessment, especially like, some of you talked about how this is happening every 5 years. So are they trying to get rid of people, working class, I guess, out of the city, because this is completely not sustainable?
Can I ask you, you said $15,000, but they're gonna spread that over multiple
no,
months. It's not a one-
Well, yes, but in 3 years. But I mean, who
Right,
has
so what
like
is your monthly?
400 who has $400 additional and to pay for the monthly assessment for the next 3 years when you have 2 college, kids, and when you're on a teacher salary? So
It's like when we did
can
the oil conversion.
can the city council do something about it? Like what are there, like, I don't know, I'm wondering if there is something that they can actually do.
We're here to brainstorm. What kind of resolution makes sense?
Talk to our council members, and we've got 3 of them.
Right.
Eric, Dina, and I keep on forgetting the woman who has Marble Hill. She's actually in Manhattan.
Sanchez,
Carmen.
Sanchez.
So we also have a lot of senior citizens here who are very old and they're on a fixed income. So so if they don't have this money, I mean, I don't know what are they gonna do? They're gonna kick them out of the building and then what? So like we're trying to find out, like, there's gotta be some information for people, right? That they obviously, they can't afford it, even if it's like $50. Well, for some people, $50 might be nothing. But for somebody who's in a fixed income, $50 means that maybe they need to stop, buying their essentials. So I'm wondering, so what kind of, maybe provide any, I guess, just contact the city council and see if there's anything that they can do?
Well, they wouldn't subsidize directly. I mean, there's tax abatements. That's the route they would take on. So
Rashida,
we'll redouble our efforts to deal with them. You know, there's a whole range of advocacy issues we go over with them every year. And this would be part of the package. And, you know, they know very well that we're very vocal about the issues associated with these inspections. They know where we are on this, and it's a very tough situation. To figure the balance of what's reasonable, what's doable, versus that which is not reasonable any longer. So we understand, your situation.
I see, Lee, thank you. I see Lee, Sebastian and Lee.
My question is,
It's Sebastian
Then
and then Lee.
You got next.
my question is, are city buildings compliant with local law 11? What happens to nature buildings and other buildings?
I don't know.
That's a good
It's
question.
a good question. I would hope they have to, but I've never looked at that. I'm busy.
The reasoning behind is that if it is costing us, it's costing city to be compliant, right?
That's right, you're absolutely right.
There's a violation on a private building, there should be a violation on a city building.
I don't disagree
Can
with
we get data on it?
Yeah, but that's just moving money from one pocket to another by doing that.
Is the data available? Is this,
We can request it from our representative.
Billions of dollars of capital projects.
Yeah.
Not enough.
On the back shelf here.
They have a shortage of billions of dollars.
most nature buildings fall into this category, right?
Well, nature buildings should also have to be safe.
Exactly.
They're 50-year-old brick buildings, they're
Yeah.
likely to have a
Yeah.
problem.
You're right.
They can't imagine they're not equally
I
inspected.
can see scaffolding in most, lot of buildings, but
That's the issue.
are they getting the violations? Are they, who's paying that bill?
Exactly.
You need to ask someone else then, yeah.
That's great.
We could,
Get
I
some
mean,
data.
we can ask, the NYCHA, rep, maybe that's a question. I don't know if anyone here, is in NYCHA or has any information. Lee,
Lee is not.
so maybe Lee
Go ahead,
has some
Lee.
information.
Unmute yourself.
I know
She's
the
unmuted.
contact person at NYCHA that we might invite to our next meeting. But to address Mary Elizabeth's concerns about the financial ability for each shareholder to pay, I don't know how her building is structured, but HPD and DHCR have funding that could help, subsidize. And she said she has a lot of seniors, so if they would be, if it's a co-op, they would be eligible for and that's something she should look into, right? Where they would exempt the taxes are no longer increase and their maintenance is stabilized at the time they're approved by Department of Finance. So that's something that we could have HPD come and talk about that. And NYCHA as well to talk about those issues. The FYI, Mike and Dick, Richard.
Ed.
No.
Ed.
David, I'm apologizing. I have a head cold. The person that started all of this is Grace Gold. I was actually living there when this all happened. So that's telling you how old I am. In any case. And actually, they named the street where it happened after her. It's called Grace Gold Way.
I think there was a response to,
Yeah. Scree, the
Nice.
building can raise the money.
Sorry.
The building can raise the money in different ways. If it does an assessment, that's not your monthly carrying charge, that's a separate. if they do it through your monthly carrying charge, there are programs called SCREE and DREE. SCREE is Senior
No,
Citizens Rate
Ed,
Increase
Ed,
Extension,
Ed, for a co-op,
which
senior housing.
I'm not, yes, there's she.
You're
I
all
don't
co-ops,
know,
it's
SCHE.
not Senior
I'm not
citizen
familiar
housing
with that
exemption.
one.
Senior citizen homeowner
Senior
exemption.
Homeowner
homeowners
exemption.
exemption.
But that, I think both of those apply to monthly carrying charges. They don't apply to assessments.
That's right.
The concept of an assessment in a building is, in effect, we're raising your cost of your ownership. You'll make it up when you sell your apartment shares on the market. But neither she nor SCREE address assessments, they address monthly maintenance fees. In terms of the DOB programs, there are architects and engineers who've come up with a list of improvements where, for instance, there's something called SWAMP when they file a building, Safe with a Repair and Maintenance Program, where you can't be swamped 2 cycles in a row, even if it's a different problem. So you're swamped because you have one problem over here, you fix that, and if you're swamped, you don't have to put up bridging all over the place, just at the area you get a fix. If you have a different problem elsewhere, they'll say the whole building's unsafe, even though the problem may be less than the problem you had the first time around. So there are architects looking at this, and I would say they need to trust the architect. The architect can file it as unsafe, let the same architect file it as safe. If there's someone who's going to be a bad actor and file things as safe, make it a criminal charge to file a building as safe, besides losing your license. There are ways to deal with the bad actors that don't punish the good actors.
I believe that architect with that building collapse may be facing criminal penalties.
Well, that's incompetence.
That's extreme.
It might be, but that's incompetence. That's not, bad actors are someone who says, I know there's a problem, but I'm gonna call it safe to save the building owner money.
Yeah.
Incompetence, you can't cure. That building collapsed, he filed a structural wall as if it were a decorative wall, as if it weren't structural.
Oops.
And then when they removed the wall, thinking, oh, it's not structural, kaboom, they found that it was structural.
Well,
Okay, I have some ideas, right? We have ideas? Go ahead.
I want to see first, anyone, have any additional questions, those of you who are, on Zoom?
I have a question, but I'm not sure if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
I can hear you.
Go ahead, Martin.
Hi.
Martin, do you mind,
Saying your full name.
and then, showing your face?
I'd like to show my face, but I don't know how to fix it so that the video turns on.
What's your last name, Martin?
Dolan, Marty Dolan.
Are you logged into Zoom or via the phone function?
I'm through the phone.
I just prompted you to show the video, you might get a button. There we go.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Martin.
So, I'm a candidate for a public advocate next year. And my question is, are you aware of any state or city, maybe it's Philadelphia or New Jersey or in Connecticut, where, these problems are remedied by some type of ombudsman? Because I think to solve the political part of this, it would be, people react if you go to a political entity and you say, hey, listen, there's a better way to do this. They do it this way in Philadelphia, or they do it this way in Baltimore, or they do it this way in Connecticut. So, it sounds like it's very bad. And I'm a former owner of historical property. where I had, the old fashioned glass, and they were trying to get, my building department was trying to get me to put, plastic sheets over, about a mile of, of glass. So I feel very sympathetic on this, but do we know enough about practices nearby?
I don't think Yonkers does this. Do they, Ed?
I
think
don't
so.
know anyone else
I
who
don't
has
think- yes.
anything like this. I assume other jurisdictions have something, but I don't know anything like this.
But that's also the kind of thing for, I think, the buildings department and council to pursue with those localities, to then bring it forward to an improvement.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
such as that, Mark.
That's right. I think if we could present to council a better model, I mean, I think they would listen to it. And we're within 10 miles of one state and 20 miles of another and 15 miles of another county. So that's kind of one angle that I will look into.
Thank you, Martin.
A step toward the solution.
Absolutely. And, we talked about, inviting HPD, talk about these subsidized maintenance programs, because that's gonna take a while. So, we gotta think about what can we do presently, what have we done in the past that doesn't work, and in preparation for the future, which is, Martin's taking the lead on. So I look forward to seeing you in more meetings, Martin.
I hope so too.
Thank you. Good.
Martin, are you
Are you a
local resident?
or you're running for public advocate just in New York City, outside of the Community Board 8?
Correct.
Outside of Community Board 8?
But you don't live in CB8?
No, I previously lived in Soundview and I'm currently in Astoria.
Okay.
Thank you for joining,
you.
Martin.
Okay. So, anyone else have any questions before we move to the next item on the agenda?
Or comments or
Any
ideas
comments?
that mentioned, right? So, all right.
We just want to give you the opportunity. All right.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for inviting us. We hope
Thank you.
we've enlightened you on a number of different things. And again, I'm gonna make one more pitch. Join ARC. If you haven't joined, we need you. This strengthens our ability to function, and good luck. If you need us again, just let us know.
Thank you.
We're planning out the elected officials event. We're working on it right now. Yes, we got several ones coming up. Yeah.
Was there a council new focus thing at Hunter last month?
Yes, yes. They did their annual
Yeah.
event, yes.
Because I was looking on the website and didn't see any events
That was
late.
2 months ago, I think, wasn't it?
November,
The
usually.
council, when did they do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they've been doing their meetings on Zoom the last few
That's
years.
right, Marion mentioned it
Yeah.
too.
Yes.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice
You'll hear from us. Thank you.
for coming.
Thank you. We'll probably,
Yes.
reaching out again. I know you said you're not necessarily.
I'm out.
Nice to meet you. Nice to see you.
Sebastian,
Nice to meet
long
you.
as,
Thanks a lot.
we'll get an extender.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're now on we're on item 6, which is the budget. We're going to start our budget conversation. You're also you can stay if you want.
Want my input? I mean, I will.
Absolutely.
If you need me, but,
For the record, absolutely.
yeah, no, I got it.
Do you need one? So everyone else who's online, we're just starting our budget conversation, surrounding, the need of, buildings in Community Board 8. So what we have, if you had the agenda, we have the last, 16 years of budget concerns, starting from 2008, fiscal year 2008, going up to now. And so we're looking to, get the conversation started because, it's never too early to get talking about these conversations,
We have the privilege of our budget chair here. Thank you, David, for coming.
So, I will just start with what some of the little bit of research that I've been doing. So this is my first time doing this sort of budget situation. And I decided to look at, some of the like the expense budget versus the, capital budget. And I highlighted some of the, recurring, I guess, recurring themes, exactly. And some of the recurring themes as far as the expense budget is concerned is, hiring inspectors for buildings and, an increase of hiring inspectors. It was either hiring them or increasing the hiring.
What's the number next, in parentheses, what does that mean?
So actually, this is not, this was sent to me, and so that would be
okay.
my question, that's the number?
I believe that was the prior year's priority.
Okay, so it was like 20 on the
Oh,
item.
then, where it is, so number
For
seven,
the
so it was number
community board.
3 in 2008, then it was number 17 in 09.
Mhm.
Got it, and then in 2011, it was number 20. So it's still,
For the whole community board, including the other committees.
so it's still top 20 across the last, whatever, 10 years, or, like, less than 10 years or whatever, okay.
I've always felt like you shouldn't let that concern you. If you think X is critically important, then it should be your first priority, regardless of how the community, board votes on it ultimately. If you think it's important, then do it. And then in the exec and at the budget meeting, you can lobby and say, no, this should be, the top priority for the community board for the following reasons.
Okay.
And those reasons typically, we try to look at equity, geography, impact, how quickly it can be done, things like that. Like you can hire a couple of inspectors. Will a couple of inspectors do much good citywide or borough-wide? Maybe not. That's for you to decide. I'm just trying to give you an example.
No, this is good information, because one of my questions, which I wasn't really sure about, especially since, like, our last meeting, we had someone ask a question regarding NYCHA, and HPD said, we don't deal with NYCHA, that's a separate, entity.
Yeah,
Then you have
that's right.
HPD dealing with, certain things, what they dealt with had to do with, tenants, so it had nothing to do with co-op owners, and now ARC has to do with co-op and condo, owners.
Let me help you with sort of the territory.
Okay.
NYCHA is a series of federally built, New York City owned and managed apartment buildings, completely separate from the Department of Buildings that looks at all architectural drawings and the health of a building, making sure they don't fall down, that they're not a fire hazard, et cetera. HPD is Housing Preservation and Development, making efforts to make sure that a building is sustainable and that people don't lose their homes. And that could be financial, that could be physical, that could be some repairs, what have you. So they really are very different entities.
Understood.
With really no crossover, because I don't even think Department of Buildings has much say over NYCHA, which is a little bizarre, because that's hundreds of thousands of
This
apartments.
goes back to Sebastian's question about, we're being like co-op owners and condo owners are being held accountable to different standards
Right.
than the city itself, and there seems to be a conflict of interest to the individual, community member that is, being bullied about doing all these facade inspections, and then bullied about the sidewalk bridges,
But
right?
everything that happens to a co-op building happens to a rental building.
But does it happen to a NYCHA building?
Not really.
Exactly, so that's where
That
it's
is
like
different.
not fair, like, why are we being held, why are shareholder buildings being held to different standards than NYCHA, right? Or are they, right, because now
I don't know
we're
if it's a
speculative,
different
right, it's all
standard.
speculative right now.
I think NYCHA is still responsible for making sure that bricks aren't falling off the facade. They're still responsible, but it's just, I don't think they have local law 11 responsibility, but as owners of the property, they're the ones who are gonna get sued. So they are responsible for making sure that the building is structurally sound and that bricks aren't falling off.
But they're doing it with city money, they're doing it with the tax dollars of the same shareholders that don't have the same support.
But David, even if co-ops and condos, if someone gets injured, something falls off that building, NYCHA is responsible, the building owners are responsible too. So if the local law 11 is not applied on one set of buildings, and is applied on other set of building, that's double standard either way.
I don't want to answer that because I don't know the exact rules about NYCHA, but I believe that they are responsible for making sure that bricks don't fall off the building.
Right, we're
What
just
the
saying, in
mechanism
the
is, I don't
same
know.
standards, right? Is the means and method of how they're held accountable the same? And Lee wants to answer.
No,
Go ahead,
NYCHA,
You're ex-HPD, aren't you?
I used to work at HPD, but NYCHA
Yeah.
is responsible to HUD. You all forgot about HUD.
Okay, thank
Housing
you.
and Urban Development, that's the federal entity. And NYCHA reports to, in New York City, which is New York City Housing Authority, reports to HUD. And they have a local office at 26 Federal Plaza. And if you want, we can get someone from HUD to come and explain their role in New York City public housing. And then also, you
That
have
would be good.
about state. There are some state public housing. There are few and far in between, but there are some. And if it's a state built and funded NYCHA, then you go to DHCR to, you know, bust their chops when a building isn't. And I don't think in Community Board 8, we have any state NYCHAs. They're all HUD. So we would have to deal with HUD on the federal level to ensure that things are getting done. But on a day-to-day basis, you deal with the local entity, which is at 26 Federal Plaza, which they're located at. And I think that's who we might want to, well, I don't think you could have a meeting with all three agencies. We might have to
Right.
prioritize, you know, whether we want to have the city, and I think the city is the bigger one. So you might want to have HPD and you might want to have the city council. I think Parina is on childcare leave and she just had a baby, I think last week. And so I don't know, you know, whether she'll be back in January or February. And maybe we can have her as the buildings chair and a representative from HPD come and speak about how they deal with these local laws that impact financially the shareholders. Because there has to be some remedy to allow a co-op to be able to make the repairs and not go belly up doing it.
Exactly.
Right. And, we actually do have plans to invite, city council, but we have
had a
to
baby.
wait until, yeah,
Get
so
through
it's
the
always,
holidays.
and actually, it really depends on their schedule. They can't always confirm until like right before. So, so that is something that's being worked on. But the reason why I brought up the, various entities is because, in terms of the budget, I'm new to like the budget, but, I always wonder if co-ops and condos actually get included in these budget concerns, or if the focus is more on, you know, Marble Hill housing or NYCHA, things like that.
Well,
That's what I wanted to understand.
Yeah, that's a very fair question. Basically, the budgets that we're requesting for, the budget allocations, the budget requests, don't go to anything. They go to we're asking city agencies to establish or expand a program that will take care of such and such. We don't say, can you give $100,000 to a building on Riverdale Avenue? No, that'll never happen. But, you know, one of the things that we have advocated for in the past is getting them to overhaul the laundry room at one of the Marble Hill buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but that wasn't giving NYCHA the money, but it was to do that project, or to redo Bailey Park, or
Right.
a playground, or, to, you know, take care of the step streets, or, you know, but there is no check written to go to an entity. We're asking each of the respective agencies to, figure out a way to make this happen. Hire some inspectors, or overhaul those elevators, things of that sort.
Nick has a question. Go ahead, Nick. Unmute, Nick.
We can't hear you. Okay, now we can
Hear
see.
me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Can
Yeah.
you hear me? Yes.
This is one of the most informative meetings. I need to come to more housing committee meetings. This was really, really informative, and Mike and Ed did a great job, and I meant to thank them again, but Mike lives in my building, so I'll thank him next time I see him, which is almost every day, which makes it even more peculiar that he wanted to see my face on camera, but whatever. Be that as it may, this NYCHA question and the purview of local law 11 is really interesting, because I did a quick scan of the law, and I don't see any, just look, I mean, obviously these laws are really long and dense. I don't see any specific exemptions for NYCHA. I would assume that, I mean, NYCHA has a capital projects division, so we could probably, somebody could just look up, go on NYCHA's site and look up the capital projects division, and they probably have a local law program unit, which essentially would make them subject to the law, including the fines and regulations, etc. But as David mentioned, the last I checked, the immediate capital deficit was something like 4 billion. And other estimates came in at 20 billion. So we could subject NYCHA to the same rules and regulations that we have in the building that Mike and I live in David's building. But I mean, you can fine them all you want. You're never going to get the money, because they don't have. You can find cracks in the facade, but you can't draw blood from it. So I mean, it's an interesting it's an interesting topic, but I mean, to me, it's just like one of those things where, you know, if NYCHA is subject, I mean, they obviously must be subject to the law, but it's like at what end? Other than, I think, as David said, they have to make sure that, you know, bricks don't fall on top of people, because then, you know, they would get sued, and they are under the supervision of HUD, as Lee mentioned. And there was a period where HUD was directly involved in the running of NYCHA for a short time, if I'm remembering it correctly. Maybe someone can refresh my memory on that.
They still are, Nick.
They still are?
It
Oh, yeah.
doesn't matter to say they ought to as well is not relevant to us.
Yeah, right. The focus is the residents, right? Like, you know, thank you, Mary, for sharing your testimony, where it's like, how are you supposed to make up for that when you're already doing your best to make ends meet already? And then there is something that the city can do to alleviate that, right? We know it's coming. Every 5 years, you're gonna be stuck with an ugly green scaffold around your building, and hopefully it gets done within the year, and then you get to enjoy 4 years without some scaffolding before it has to go right back up, so you don't get violations. So, and that's just not, like, you know, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Frankly, the violations are thousands of dollars. The projects are millions of dollars.
Right, so, okay, so what? So do we just not do it and then just work with the violations until somebody gets hit, you know, in a brick in their head, and then now we're back at ground, you know, we're back at the same thing?
Well, it's a philosophical discussion that is not worthy of having here, and that's why I think we should pursue it with Councilmember Sanchez. Because the city needs to dial it back. It probably should be every 10 to 15 years.
Okay.
And again,
And we're not, right, we're not giving our judgment on that, but we should ask the question, like, is it overkill right now because it's digging into the pockets of working families, and that doesn't make any sense?
Is there a legitimate risk? I mean, nobody wants to expose people to falling bricks.
Absolutely not.
But it's also very rare that they
I
fall.
mean, right, well, I'd love to get more research on it, right? Like, I don't know how many times, and then it goes back to what Michael was saying, where it's like, it becomes very political, right? One person, you know, one brick falls in 20 years, and now you know, everybody wants to know what our elected officials are gonna do about that one incident, right? And then, you know, kind of just pin, you know, like, you know, a blanket resolution on everybody, and it doesn't help, it doesn't help.
CYA in it all, so.
Exactly, right, so how do we?
Including the
yeah.
architects, that they're protecting their licenses.
Okay. Anybody else have comments or questions?
No, I just want to say, I think you guys are spot on in terms of, you know, raising this issue. And it does appear, based on today's presentation, that the law has gotten a little too restrictive. And I do totally understand the political aspects of it, but I think it's really good that you all are bringing this to the attention of the city and the community, so that they know that it is a real, it can be a real financial burden for a lot of people. So thanks for doing this. It's really interesting.
Mark's
You.
the first person that talked about finding out what other cities are doing.
Yeah, I like that idea, Martin. We'll definitely look forward to your follow-up on that, where we can't, you know, we're not the only city with brick buildings or brick building high-rises, right? So what are other cities doing, or are they also kind of putting pressure on their shareholders as well, right? You know, are they surviving on less stricter policies? And, you know, should we adopt that and, you know, to David's point, reel it back a little bit because the data doesn't support the policies in place currently?
And I also want to thank Mary Elizabeth for bringing this to my attention in terms of the assessment. This is what sparked the whole, we should have co-ops and condos, someone to speak on behalf of co-ops and condominiums, because that was she is living proof that, you know, real people are being hit with these bills, and they're expected to pay them in a certain amount of time.
This is the first time that ARC has come to speak in 5 or 10 years on anything.
Yeah, that's why he said he doesn't know a name on this committee.
So this is really perfect. This is a good way to go into the new year.
Yeah,
Not with the brick
absolutely.
falling, but with the knowledge that we give. Nick is laughing.
I mean, right, our office welcomes any testimonies, Mary, so if you wanna submit like a statement, that helps us, you know, kind of tell the narrative, tell the story to our elected officials, where it's just like, you know, just put it in writing, you know, your story in writing, and we can share that as testimony, where it's like, you know, you know, we can petition for this being a priority in going into 2025. So, well, you know, I know the email to the office is on here.
She's spoken to
Okay.
Artie.
Oh, excellent. If you wanna collect
Very happy to
testimonies.
do that. Hello? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Like the gentleman said, this was very informative and super helpful. I wish I would have attended to other meetings, so I appreciate it. I am very happy to definitely provide something. I can speak to Ms. Hilliard about it, and or if there's an email, I mean, I can be in touch with her, so that's fine. And I'm happy to provide something, because it's not only my stories, there's a lot of stories in our building. And I think we need a voice out there to really hear what a lot of us are going through at the moment.
Oh, thank you. We I think we have started something, and then
Absolutely, I got your back. Let's go.
thank you. We thank all of you.
You wanna finish
Actually, I just want to ask anyone have any questions about the budget situation? We just wanted to get that conversation started, but I think it was just
I think, to David's point, like, you know, if it's important, just do it. Like, I don't mind going into 2025 and being like, this local law 11 stuff needs to get handled, and it needs to be our #1 priority, at least for our shareholder, like, co-op and condo community, right? So I don't know how it affects our NYCHA residents, but, you know, at least for that, you know, like, the community members that are co-ops and condos, like, let that be, like, our priority for them, you know?
Yes.
I know with NYCHA it was heating, right? We did get that passed, right, with the boiler replacement, right? That was a huge capital project for NYCHA. I'm good with 2025 being the turn for the co-ops and condos. So, yeah, like, I support us doing this.
I just want to go back to, sorry.
Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, yes, Sebastian and then Lee after Sebastian.
Okay, sorry. So last meeting, we discussed about these inspectors coming at night, right, for heating inspection. So we do understand that there are cases where people switch on their ovens because the apartments are not heated, which leads to all kinds of issues, including fire. Now, from what I understood from last meeting from HPD, they do not have anyone going overnight
Correct.
to inspect apartments if there is heating or not.
Right.
Maybe that is a capital item to,
It's everywhere. It's the shortage of inspectors. They don't have the people.
yeah, but do they have a slot for someone to go at night to inspect?
They don't have the budget, like, right now, and that's where this comes in, the budget. So now they need more money to have more inspectors, to have, a second shift of inspectors. So it's all connected.
Well, but frankly, your committee could write a letter with Julie saying, we request that the staffing be adjusted so that there were some nighttime inspections.
I love that idea, because at the end of the day,
It
most
would
people
really
are
have
at
to come
work,
from
right?
Julie,
Now I gotta take
but-
off work because an inspector's coming, I gotta open the door, I'm not home.
There are different rules of heat at night than there are during the daytime. That's the key
And
issue.
the key issue is that we're not monitoring that as much, or at all, actually, right, according to our last meeting.
Even time.
I do not think even if they receive a complaint, if you call 311 and a complaint,
You never
there's
catch
no
it.
heating
You're never
at
catch it.
night, I believe the building owners can take advantage of that. There are no inspectors, there will be no inspections.
So that should be a 311 option, saying like a nighttime inspection, at that building.
Yeah.
I like that
To put that
idea.
in, we'll make sure to keep that on the budget, the item of the inspectors, but maybe we'll sort of qualify.
Well, I would work, you should work with Julie to write a letter
Right. I have that.
separately.
Okay, separate from that, but,
So, separate from the budget. You want more inspectors,
At night.
you want more inspectors, you may
More
make a comment.
inspections.
for the inspection.
No, because the idea is
Well,
that
it is
you
programmatic,
don't
so
have
you
a
couldn't say
second
that.
shift. You don't have a second shift of inspectors, they don't exist. That means that if you're not getting heat at night, even if you can't, you can't complain about it because you can't record it because there's no one available to do it. So then you get away with it, because it's like, the question becomes, prove it, right? And then you don't have that impartial party to prove it because it doesn't exist.
The building,
What you could say is, like you have on one of these, is allocate funding for nighttime inspectors.
Or even beyond that, yes, I agree with that, I mentioned that earlier, but the second thing is splitting it. You got, if you have 300 inspectors, right, 150 on the first shift and 150 on the
That's what
second shift.
allocation is.
No, allocation, but you had mentioned allocating budget versus allocating inspectors, two different things. I'm talking about with the inspectors you already have, in lieu of getting more, use what you have. Now we're not asking for more money or more inspectors, we're just saying split the shift.
Maybe rotate, this is something else that they can get into, but if there are people who are like, okay, I don't wanna work the night, then maybe just have it rotate, because then people, but yeah.
But we're talking a second shift, we're not talking a
That's a
third.
management issue.
Right,
Right.
which we can ask them for more information on. Right.
We're doing a lot of research this upcoming year. Actually, Lee had a comment or a question.
No, I just wanted to add on to the fact that every year since I've been on the board, we've always asked for building inspectors, but you have to be specific. You want to increase the number of inspectors from HPD, which does the heat inspections, and DOB, which does construction inspections. So you have to be very specific from what departments, what agencies you want, and what for.
I agree, because I'm looking at this budget, again, it was top 3 in '08, then it was number 17 in '09. It's like we've been asking for inspectors for decades now, and I don't have any evidence that anything has actually happened. And it continues to be, whether it's top 10 or top 20, it has, I don't have any evidence that anything has actually happened.
because that's why I even marked for 2026 now, is that
Yet again, it came up, yet again.
increased housing preservation and department housing inspectors, given the number of 311 calls, and so
It's
the word
getting more and more
changes
specific.
slightly, but
yeah.
that's why I had the purple to show that we keep requesting housing inspectors.
That's what the purple means.
Yeah. Oh, I thought it was VCPC, no, I'm kidding. But yeah, that was just to start the conversation, like what were some of the expenses that kept coming up and if they've been addressed. Maroon.
Okay.
But yeah,
Hi,
so
Rashida.
that's, oh, yes, that's Julie.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, how are
Hi.
you?
Listen, I'm going to echo in with Nick. This is a great meeting. Thank you so much. I just wanted
Thank you all.
to just say that you could also ask Farah, and David will surely go over it with you, the responses throughout the year, because I just heard, well, how do we know the responses? I don't even know what happens. Farah can share the responses throughout the years, so you can kind of get a gauge as to what it has been.
Thank you. I'll get on that, before the year's out.
You have all of 2025. This is a holiday week. I'm surprised you even had a meeting, but thank you.
You know, you can't sleep. I mean, we have to be awake, just like the housing inspectors need to be. No, I'm kidding.
Don't get mad at her, right, the first meeting.
No, thank you. At least it gives us an idea of what we should be, working towards. Yeah, good focus. So I won't ask any further questions about the budget unless there's unless we seriously miss something. Maybe Lee, I don't know, if you don't, okay, thank you. So I just want to move now to the 7th item, which is the chair's report. And so this is just a short report. The community board recently shared some information from the mayor's office, and the information was entitled, Mayor Adams announces new charter revision commission to continue important work tackling generational housing crisis impacting working class New Yorkers. So I just want to give a little bit of background information, although the full report is linked in this notice. So basically, New York City Mayor Adams recently announced that the appointment of the Charter Revision Commission, CRC, under the direction of Richard Bury, I believe that's the name, but Buery, CEO of Robin Hood. The goal of the CRC, or the Charter Revision Commission, is to maintain transparency and responsiveness of the city's municipal government to the needs of denizens of the city, particularly as they relate to providing affordable housing to working-class New Yorkers and their families. So that is basically what my little chair's report is. If you're interested in hearing more or reading more about it, you can look up Mayor Adams' Charter Revision Commission, but I linked the full report to the meeting notice.
Oh, in the meeting notes.
In the meeting notes, yes. Any questions or comments about that? Okay, so then our next item is old business. Any old business? Try to give some wait time, okay. Any new business? I mean, we have a lot of business to deal with, but any new business?
Well, we got the new business, right? So,
Yeah,
you know, we talked about it a few times. I don't know if we need to repeat it.
just making sure.
Okay.
And so, we have our new business, as Jessica mentioned. So if there are no further questions or comments, then I move to adjourn this meeting at, 7:34.
Thank you, everyone. Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas.
Happy
Happy
holidays,
Kwanzaa.
everyone. Great job.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
Enjoy.
Wishing you all
Bye,
well.
guys.
Be safe.
Thank-
Happy holidays.
You too.
Thank you.
Oh, did you just turn off the TV? I didn't stop the recording. What happened?
No, I think it went off on its
Oh,
own.
it just went off? Oh, that works too. That's fine.
It goes off and on.
Okay, end. I'm gonna end then.
Yeah, I think it